descending tracts, now the motor cortex has formed a motor plan. Once the motor plan is formed, it has to send its impulses to the lower region through the tracts, and finally it has to reach the spinal cord, and from the spinal cord the nerves will exit and perform the action. So the older classification that was given is pyramidal tract and extrapyramidal tract. The pyramidal tract which was involved, which is also called pyramidal tract, is the corticospinal tract. Previously, only corticospinal tract was called as pyramidal tract, and rest all the tracts were called as extrapyramidal tracts. And this corticospinal tract, we'll just brief them through. This corticospinal tract starts from the cerebral cortex, and there are some cells called as pyramidal cells. The pyramidal cells, they will start the corticospinal tract, and from there they will go to the medulla, and the crossing over happens at the medullary level, and they will form the lateral corticospinal tract. Lateral corticospinal tract. This is around 80% of the fibers. So the crossing over, we can consider it happens at the medulla. Even though 20% fibers directly go to the anterior corticospinal tract, it is nothing but our anterior corticospinal tract. So this lateral corticospinal tract is 80%, and the rest 20% is contributed by this another tract. So a total of 100%. But maximum, we will say that the crossing over happens in the medulla, because maximum fibers are crossing in the medulla. And this lateral corticospinal tract is very, very essential for the contraction of the distal muscles. Distal muscles means these are for the fine movements. Fine movements, we need more fibers, obviously, because fine movements are very difficult to do. For a posture maintenance, that is a proximal muscle, we don't need that many muscle groups. So this will supply the distal muscles. This will supply the distal muscles, whereas this is going to supply the proximal muscles. The proximal muscles are usually involved in posture control. This is the older classification, but the newer classification goes differently. It has medial pathways and lateral pathways. The lateral pathways will control the distal portions. Right now we saw this is also a lateral pathway which is controlling the distal portion. So lateral pathway will control the distal portions of the limb, and they will do the fine movements. So whichever tract is involved in controlling the fine movements, they will be classified in the lateral pathway, and whichever tract is involved in controlling the gross movements, that is the axial body posture and proximal limb, and for the posture and gross movements, it is called as the medial pathways. So right now the present classification is lateral and medial. Now we will discuss all the tracts in one diagram. Please pay attention to this diagram, because this can help us to answer a lot of MCQs. All the decorticate, decerebrate, whatever rigidity they ask, we can answer it from this simple diagram. So first, we are grouping them as lateral and medial group of tracts. Now we are talking about all the descending tracts. In that, the primary group is lateral and other group is medial. Lateral group we will start first. Now on the left side you can see the representation of cortex, midbrain, pons, medulla, then the cervical region, then the lumbosacral region. If any tract is going till the cervical region, if it is coming till the cervical region, they can influence majorly the upper limbs only. But if the tract is going along till the lumbosacral regions, they will influence the upper limbs also as well as the lower limbs. So you have to understand, if I have stopped a tract at a particular section, like for example cervical, what does it mean? It comes till the cervical level and it will control predominantly the upper limbs. So this is the cortex, then this is the midbrain, followed by pons, medulla and lumbosacral region. Now coming to the discussion of specifically of lateral tracts. Lateral tracts is very easy to remember. We have only two lateral tracts. Out of these two lateral tracts, one we have already seen, that is the corticospinal tract. In that, the lateral corticospinal tract. The lateral corticospinal tract is essential for the control of distal muscles. They are essential for the control of distal muscles. Whereas the red nucleus, which is also called as the rubrospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract is very, very essential for the alpha flexus. And make sure to note down here, we have stopped it at the cervical limb. So this rubrospinal tract predominantly can cause the upper limb flexion. It can cause the upper limb flexion. So this rubrospinal tract has the ability to cause upper limb flexion, because we have stopped it to the upper limb only, that is the cervical region. So only two tracts in lateral tract, lateral corticospinal and rubrospinal. Rest everything is medial tracts. The medial tracts starts with the corticospinal tract, which is the ventral corticospinal tract, ventral corticospinal tract will innervate the proximal muscles, proximal group of muscles. They are involved in maintaining the posture. Then comes the tectum. There is a region in the brain called as tectum. This tectospinal tract goes up to the cervical level only, and they are involved in head and eye coordination movements. They are involved in head and eye coordination movements. Then there are two tracts which is called as reticulospinal. This is not a rubrospinal. This R stands here for reticulospinal. Reticulospinal. So there are two reticulospinal tracts. As you can see here, we'll shade this in green, all of them. So as you can see here, the pontine, there are two reticulospinal tracts. One is from the pons and one is from the medulla. This pons is called as pontine reticulospinal tract, and from the medulla it is called as medullary reticulospinal tract. Both of them are going to the gamma extensor. And what is the function of gamma extensor? Gamma extensor, whenever they are getting activated, they indirectly act the 1A fibers, and finally they will activate the alpha motor neurons. So even the gamma extensor, they have to, if they have to cause contraction, what they have to do? They have to activate the 1A fibers, and from them they are going to act the alpha motor neurons, and finally they will cause the extension, because alpha motor are the final end neurons. Alpha motors are the final end neurons. After this pontine and medulla, we should remember one important point. This pontine reticulospinal fibers, they are stimulatory. Everything is important. They are stimulatory to the gamma extensor. Whereas the medullary reticulospinal fibers, they are inhibitory to the alpha gamma extensors. But out of this, if you ask me which is the dominant tract, the dominant tract is pons. The dominant tract is pons. Then finally the vestibular nuclei. Vestibular nuclei, they form the vestibulospinal tract, and they will cause alpha extensions. Alpha extensors, they can directly activate. So if we know this, then we can deal with all kind of decerebrate and decorticate rigidity. Now two clinically important aspects are there. One is called as the Brown-Sequard syndrome, another one is the decorticate and decerebrate rigidity. We'll see them one by one, but remember these points. Lateral tract, red nucleus is the most important one, and in the medial tract, pontine is the most important one. If you don't remember any of this tract, just remember these two tracts. We can do all the lesions in the brain, like that decorticate and decerebrate lesions.